Open Advanced Kin 1 and go to Echo 202. Click on the Finger Modes and Resources folder. The first resource we're working with is the IMR protocol, version 4.1. We're focusing on the immune mismatch response. So we use that term IMR, and it's a trademark PKP thing, so probably nobody else uses it. The reason that we're doing it is because we're trying to get away from using the words allergy or hypersensitivity, because they are medical terms, and the dermatologist or the immunologist can do blood tests to see if there's antibodies that have been produced, which then confirms that there is an allergy response. So you can have an over-the-top reaction to something without actually producing the antibodies. So if you go to the specialist with that, the medical specialist, they say, no, you don't have an allergy or you don't have a hypersensitivity, but clearly your body doesn't like it. And so rather than splitting hairs and saying, it's not this, it is this, we just say, well, any product that's going to cause a reactive kind of response and a mismatch of the immune system, we're interested in working with that. So thinking about adverse reactions or the way we respond to different substances, the overreactive state is that hypersensitive, where a small amount of perhaps a commonly experienced substance like pollen or dust can cause a big cascade of histamine or inflammatory responses in the body. So I would say that that's an overreactive state. But also the underreactive state is when you've got a toxin and it's causing problems in the body, but you don't appear to have any symptoms. So you're obliviously taking it without realizing that this product is no good for you. And, you think about, there's lots of medications or foods that we eat without realizing, if it was a food additive like a preservative, unless you have an anaphylaxis to it, you don't realize that those sulfates are actually doing you damage. And yet there's all this spectrum of sensitivity that's occurring that we can pick up before it gets to that extreme point. So the substance could be classed as contact, which means it's coming onto the skin. So whenever contact tests up in the process, you want to think of what cleaning products are you coming in contact with, what cosmetic products, what cleansers, what soaps, washing powders, softeners can cause problems for people. I stayed at a motel one night where I had to wear long sleeve pants and shirt because my skin was reacting to the sheets. It's like, oh my God, I can't even lie here in this. It was pretty ordinary.
Well, do you remember Eva had the burns on her hand?
No.
This is like a couple of months ago.
Yeah. What was that from?
It came up as a burn. And then we realized there was a spot on her toe and there was a spot on her stomach or something. Well, we couldn't figure out. We tried everything, and like I tested through a whole heap of things. Well, Chantel finally did a balance on her a couple of weeks ago, and she said, and Chantel said, "Oh, yeah, there's a reaction going on. What have you been exposed to?" And suddenly Eva remembered the burns that she'd had, which are now just cleared up, but you can still see the scars. And that's what was still being held in her liver. So she
burned from, did you know?
Well, we tested a whole heap of things, like, and I'm sitting there going, okay, well, check domestos because I do use that in the shower occasionally. No, it wasn't domestos. Check Eva had used Windex. Check that. No, it wasn't that. We went through a whole heap of things, and then suddenly I just went, check chlorhexidine. And that's what tested up was chlorhexidine. Now, I know from my nursing experience, chlorhexidine it's a hospital grade disinfectant, and they quite often add it into hand washes and products like that, particularly in schools and wherever else. So she's come into contact with it somewhere.
Yeah, okay. And that's the one I think that the nurses get allergic to when they're washing all the time, isn't
And
it?
that's what made me think of it because I'm allergic to it. When I was nursing, I like my hands were blistered all the time.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay. So that's the kind of detective work that we need to do. And if you can't find it in the balance, when you test up contact and you're trying to identify what it is, what I would do is I would ask, do we need to know? So, because if you don't need to know, it's possible that it's something that they've come into contact with in the past and they're not currently experiencing it. So you can do the clearing and you don't need to know. But if it is, for instance, washing powder or toothpaste or shampoo, you need to know that.
Yeah.
You absolutely need to know that so that the client can create the change. So yeah, contact. If you can't easily come up with a list, then it's probably useful for you to write a little list to put next to that of all the things that you could test. But I find it's pretty normal that the client knows it. Now, what I've noticed in the last year or two is I've had a couple of young people that have used face products that are cleansers that have caused a reaction of acne.
Yeah.
And that cleanser has even caused the acne on, like, so I'll be massaging this young woman and I said to her, what are you doing? Have you changed something in your cleansing routine? And she said, yeah, I've got a new cleanser. And I quickly tested and I said, don't use that one anymore. That's
Yeah.
what's causing the acne on your back.
And
So
that can even be natural ones too. I know Eva has the same thing with Sukin products.
yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, Sukin's still got quite a lot of stuff in it,
Mm.
even though it's
Even though they're supposed
promoted.
to being quite
Yeah,
good. Yeah.
yeah. So that's the contact. The inhaled is via the respiratory system, obviously. So thinking all of your petroleum type products that end up in the air, the smells of the new car, new furniture, the plastics that the smells that come off that can cause problems. The smell of glues, epoxies.
Yeah.
So when I had my converted garage, when they put the flooring in, it was cold and it was winter and I had the windows shut for a couple of nights and I would wake up with headaches, and so I had to get an extra doona and sleep in the cold and have a clear head. Yeah, so other inhales, we can inhale pollen, dust. um People can use essential oils, can burn essential oils that can cause problems for others. You can put them in the sprays so you think that you're making your room nice, but you're actually, other people, it doesn't suit. Yeah, so I think that, is there anything else I've missed there with the inhale?
No, that's pretty good.
Cigarettes.
Yeah, cigarettes.
Yeah, vaping would come under that because you're inhaling.
Yeah.
Um, it might be a medication that you're inhaling, an asthma one, which is don't tell them to stop. Balance them to it. Get them to talk to their doctor about other options. Don't tell them to stop. And then, of course, there's anything ingested, and that can be so many different things can be ingested. So just, do your detective work. Yeah. Remember the resume you had for the FBI? Get that one out. Okay, so there are all the different ways that we can have a over-the-top immune system response. So we can talk about responses that are happening in present time, things that we're doing right now, what we do on a daily basis, or the substance can come from the past. So I've got here, pollen is the thing that's happening in the present time, and people recognize that that's a seasonal response that they have, but they a medication that you took maybe 10, 15 years ago can still energetically be a memory in at the cellular level, and that energetic memory, or the signature, seems to be locked into the cellular membrane. So we need to clear that. And the way that I describe that to clients is I say, well, when you have alcohol, you drink the night before, and then the next day you feel the hangover effect. That's because the liver is still detoxing. Well, just imagine that it's never quite detoxed. So it's still this hangover effect of whatever that substance is still locked into the system somewhere. Yeah. So another thing to consider is that when people are trying to ascertain what their body is reacting to, some toxins don't cause an immediate response. And so what I found was with preservatives, food additives, that didn't cause a immediate response in my sons, because they were off them. And then they'd have a birthday party, and they go to the birthday party and they would be fine. And then 2 days later, their system would just kind of have the meltdown. It was a delayed response, especially if it was layered. So you had the birthday party, and then you went to another family thing, and then there was another Easter egg thing or something. And then those 3 days in a row, just expect the meltdown to come. But if the person is having these triggering things all the time, then you're not going to be able to easily see what's the straw that broke the camel's back. It's not, you can't always ascertain that. The other thing is, so moving along with that, that's like the preservative 282. It's in a lot of breads. It's in a lot of sausages. So if you're eating outside of the home and you don't have the labels, the food labels, you don't know what toxins are in the foods that you've had. So that can factor into, we don't know what we're clearing here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes we actually identify specifically what it is, and other times we clear whatever that energetic is, that it's something that you've come in contact with and we don't know. There are 7 specific modes that PKP uses to address the IMR response. We never make a diagnosis. Rather, we use the modes to identify the presence of the triggering substance, and then we use them to clear. Now, we've already learned about C1, and there's a bit of a summary there that you can have a read of later, but we don't perform specific correction for an unlocking C1. So if say, for instance, I've got a product that I want to put next to the product and test for the client. If C1 unlocks, then I just record that. There is no balance that I would do specifically related to C1. The ear acupressure point. This was interesting. In putting this together, I looked up what the origin of the ear acu is, and you may have the misconception that this is, 2,000 years of Chinese wisdom. It's actually not. It comes from a fella called Paul Nodgier, who was a French physician, and he used the allergy point that's at the top of the ear as well as other points. And when he got significant results, significant success in his practice with clients, he published a document about it in 1956, which was printed in China and was translated and printed in China. And then the Chinese acupuncturists used that information to map the points on the ear. So it became called an allergy ear acu point, but it wasn't necessarily acupuncture or acupressure that was the origin of it. So there was also, if you look up this fellow Nada Solomon, he has used some of Nodge's work, and he's described this allergy zone here in the grey as an area that can be stimulated to reduce an allergy response. And then there's also these other points. If you look at the picture with the red circles on the ear, you've got our traditional allergy point up the top, and then they've got a couple of other ones that have been identified as useful. So again, if you have a product that causes an unlock on the ear acu point, PKP doesn't have a specific balance to correct that. But once I read all this, I thought, oh, maybe we could write one. Because if we were stimulating these points, if we could test which points were needed to be stimulated, we can use those in a protocol to begin to clear the allergy response in the person, the IMR. So I've given you a student research opportunity here. When the indicator unlocks on the ear acu IMR screening point, use a toothpick or a similar pointy object like you can use a pencil that's not going to draw on the client, or a pointy shell, something that's going to activate that specific point, and test up how long to stimulate it for, and record the findings, and then report back to us. Tell us whether or not this is going to be worth actually using. Is it going to work? It's basically saying, can we write a procedure that uses the ear acu point and Solomon's information to clear allergies?
Yeah, okay.
So I'll probably put that together, but haven't done it this week. This video here goes into 3D and shows you how to access the points on the ear so some of them are actually hidden behind spots, because the cartilage isn't flat. So it's worth having a look at the video and taking some time to have a play with that. But anyway, so the point that I'm making there, the overview point that I'm making is that C1 and ear acu, what you have been told in the past is if a food or a substance tests unlocking to those two techniques, then do not recommend that for the client. But what if it's an allergy that you're trying to fix? You got to do something right. So we combine them into the balancing process we call the IMR protocol. So the other modes that are part of the IMR protocol is structural 5.5A quasi-vol. So it's on the structural finger. It's on the pinky side, 5.5. So it's in the same spot where the conflicts and reversals is on the emotional finger. So you've got now I'll just stop the share for a moment. Structural 5.5A. You've also got personal ecology 5.5. You've got emotional 5.5. Those 3 points are all in the same spot on each finger. So the structural one is quasi-vol, which means not, what's the term? Having some resemblance. So it's almost the vol point, which we'll talk about in a minute. This one is our point for the vol one. And then this one is conflicts and reversals, which are caused because we've got this over-the-top immune response. So they're those three. And then the other ones is personal ecology 9, which is hidden. Now, if you remember, electrical 9 is hidden muscle. And personal ecology 9 is hidden allergy. So it's when we're not aware of it. And then the last one is emotional 11, which is on the thumb. So 10 is on the nail bed, 11 is on the knuckle. So quasi-vol comes from Mary Anderson. It relates to the vol point. Dr. Vol was a German doctor who was using acupressure points to measure electrical charge and electrical flow in the body. And so it was an error that Mary Anderson, she was using this instead of the other one, but she found that it worked and it was useful. Dr. Dew says it often happens with supplements, that if people are taking a supplement and it's causing a problem in the body, that mode will occur. The basic balancing technique for the quasi-vol mode is to put that mode in circuit and then use any finger mode to clear it. When we do the IMR process, because you have multiple unlocks, we've put the IMR protocol all together. So once we go into the IMR protocol, you'll see what I mean. But I just want to give you the overview of these are all the points we're dealing with. The next one, PE 5.5A, is the true vol. So it's Dr. Vol's point where he used electrodermal testing and Vega testing. Sometimes it's called a listen machine. Sometimes I think people use radionics with it, but historically possible allergens, toxins, or the treatments that people were thinking of doing could be placed within a device like the radionics one, and then they would test how did that affect the electrical flow of the body. So science, mainstream science does not put much faith in this method of allergy testing. What I have found is that when a person has tested up with these, when they've gone to a naturopath or a practitioner who's used these kinds of machines, they tend to have an immune response to so many different things that you can't really tell which one's the most important. So, for example, when my son had allergies, his problem with milk, eggs, dairy, wheat, sugar, honey, preservatives, flavors, colors, all of those things, how do you know which one was the triggering one? And you couldn't tell. And those doctors will say you need to come off all of those things, which if we can find the trigger, then maybe you only need to come off 1 or 2 of them because they're the most important ones. The true vol point, the PKP balancing technique for true vol, what we do is we test up which neurolymphatic is involved to help clear the gunk that's in the system. So we activate that lymphatic and we do cross crawl at the same time. So that's quite a challenge for clients to do. And it can be tricky to demonstrate, but that is a great, even if you don't have time to do a full IMR correction, that can be a really good first aid, is to just test up which neurolymphatic they need, get them to hold it, and as they're holding it, cross crawl.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're in the modes of, oh, I'm having this reaction and I can't cope, well, which lymphatic, hold it, cross crawl. That's that one. Conflicts and reversals, we know how to clear that. We've been working with that for a couple.
So what, you just test the alarms to find, yeah?
Well,
Okay.
it's in the process. So we'll go into it in nitty-gritty, but I wanted to show you all of these first so that because we don't, in the IMR protocol, you test whichever balance is needed. It could be any one of these balances, because say you're responding to pollen, you might have 3 or 4 of these IMR modes that unlock. So how do you know which one to do? What's the right one? So we just combine them. And each time you do an IMR, put them all together and test which aspects you're going to do. So it's easier. You already know how to do conflicts and reversals. Hidden, this is often when it's not necessarily the whole food itself. It might be a chemical that's in the food. So it can even be like salicylates or amines, those kind of things. So it's a part of a food. So it's hard to know what it is because it might be multiple foods that is causing that problem. PKP says it seems to correlate closely with the circulating the processes of C1, but it doesn't replace the test. And so Gary Arthur was the one who said sometimes when you suspect that a food or a product is causing an IMR response, but you don't get a change, you can tap this temporosphenical line, and it's kind of like, hey, let's just double check what's going on there. And so when you do that and then test a indicator muscle, if it unlocks, then that's also a hidden IMR. The PKP basic balancing technique for the hidden mode is to use finger modes again. And then the final one is the emotional 11, the psychological IMR. And this tends to happen when there's a strong emotional component. So it might be like a placebo or nocebo, where you believe that this thing is going to give you a response. A classic one was, I forced my kid to eat pumpkin one time, so he the table and then forever more pumpkin, made him sick. Yeah, bad mother I was. Being forced to eat something as a child when an angry, frustrated, not coping parent or other authority stood over the child in a threatening manner, or just said, you can't have ice cream if you don't eat that. So they forced themselves to eat it and got sick.
Guilty of all those things.
Yeah, whatever. Oh, well, poor children who get 3 square meals a day that are healthy and not full of junk.
That's right.
Yeah. But also he's talked about, this is Bruce's example, being forced to do something with food, like the young Italian child being forced by the intolerant father to make pizza dough while his mates are out playing. So the wheat has a problem. If you want to have a look at how emotions might affect food and how putting them in, there's a a art house movie called Like Water for Chocolate, and it's really
I
cool.
know that one.
That's a great movie for putting emotions into food.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, sometimes simply being in the energetic field of a large volume of the food, like just being in the supermarket, can push people into a psychological reversal. So, Trevor Savage, he's in Brisbane. He used the allergy and phobia terms interchangeably. So he said whether you have an allergy or whether you have a phobia of this thing, it's the same thing. His clearing process involved tapping the meridian to clear the mode. So PKP has modified that a little bit. So we call it PKP.
So his thing, Trevor Savage, ND. What's ND?
Naturopath.
Oh, okay.
I think it's naturopathic doctor.
Doctor. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so the meridian tapping point, we just circulate the alarms to find the meridian and then find the point on the meridian and then you tap it.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's all written into our protocol.